You're about to enter a place where silence hides secrets, where the sand covers erased stories, and where a forgotten deity still whispers, not with words, but with ritual, blood, and fear. Today we'll uncover what many tried to bury twice, once with stone and again with silence. A goddess of ancient Egypt who doesn't appear in history books, who isn't present in restored temples, and whose offerings demanded something the Egyptians always swore they never practiced: human sacrifice. Her story doesn't begin in the golden halls of Luxor or on the painted walls of Karnak. It begins in the alleys of time, in the margins of what was left behind. And everything we know about this entity comes from fragments, erased symbols, ignored relics, and the uneasy testimonies of those who got too close. Egyptian priests prized an image of order, harmony, and balance. Their entire cosmology was built on Ma'at, cosmic justice, the alignment of the universe. Human sacrifice was officially condemned. Even in death, everything was symbolic, controlled, ritualized. But what if there was a parallel line, a shadow cult suppressed by the dominant theology, something so ancient and dangerous that the gods themselves rejected it? In 2001, during an otherwise routine excavation near the Temple of Dendera, something unexpected happened. A wall partially collapsed, revealing a hidden chamber. It didn't resemble any known temple structure. There were no decorated columns, no inscriptions praising pharaohs, just raw stone, stale air, and the immediate sense that the room did not want to be seen. In the center stood a broken statue, female, imposing, with the face deliberately destroyed. Only the chin and one eye remained. That eye was deep, asymmetrical, and roughly carved. Around it, the floor told another story. Shallow circular grooves connected the statue's base to a central opening in the stone, some kind of drainage system. And within those grooves were remnants of something dense, something living. Later analysis confirmed it: ancient human blood. Oxidized, decayed, but undeniably present. Enough to raise disturbing possibilities. Possibilities that no one wanted to document officially. Possibilities involving direct sacrifice, and who was the figure represented there? On the partially damaged walls, a name appeared: Sheshe, a name found nowhere else in official temples, absent from the sacred texts of Heliopolis. And yet, every time it resurfaced, it came with the same signs: destruction, concealment, blood. Sheshet is described in fringe papyri, found far from religious centers. In Deir el-Medina, a village of artisans, one fragment speaks of she who judges the unjudged. In Amarna, buried beneath broken ceramics, a repeated spiral symbol identical to the one found on the Dendera pedestal. In a burnt papyrus from a secondary tomb in Abydos, we read, "She answers only to the pulse, the still are nothing to her." These texts describe rituals performed at night. Offerings not of objects, but of presence, of the breathing, of the screaming. And the reason was clear, if disturbing. Sheshe was not a goddess of the afterlife. She was an entity of the threshold, between life and death, between sound and silence. An oracle of transition. A goddess who spoke not with words, but with the absence of them. And to manifest, she needed living blood. As these fragments came together, a dark pattern emerged. Each time Sheshe's name appeared, it came with three elements: concentric circles around an asymmetrical eye, references to flesh portals, and the unsettling phrase, "The heart offered in life is heard by her in the void." Then came the artifacts. In 2009, near the ancient city of Komombo, a ritual alabaster bowl was discovered. On the outside, it appeared ordinary, but inside were microscopic spiral carvings. When filled with water and lit from the side, the reflected image appeared to spin without any movement in the liquid. It seemed like an optical illusion until 3 team members reported dizziness, blackouts, and voices. Whispers of names, ancient Egyptian names, some unknown even to the chamber's inscriptions. As if something, or someone, had returned them. The bowl was taken for lab study. Days later, the research was halted after one scientist accidentally cut his hand. He bled onto the bowl and reported feeling a sudden warmth. For 3 days, he dreamed of an underground temple filled with faceless people, surrounding a veiled woman who extended her hands, asking for something he couldn't name. The dreams stopped only when he was removed from the project. Another item surfaced in the Nile Delta in an unregistered burial ground. A limestone stela with a single image, an inverted eye and mouth, surrounded by drops. Translated loosely, it read, "She sees only what is offered at the moment of departure. All else is echo without shadow." Again and again, the evidence pointed to a belief system operating outside sanctioned religion, perhaps connected to dissident sects, perhaps to families who had lost faith in the state gods and turned to something older, more primal, something that demanded real sacrifice. Then came a rare manuscript found in the underground library of a southern European university, transcribed in the 19th century by a French Egyptologist who died before publishing it. The text describes the forgotten rites of the desert women, rituals performed only by secluded priestesses. One called the Day of the Last Light involved the sacrifice of a virgin before a faceless statue to ensure that the sun would rise once more. The statue was called She Who Holds the First Breath. Sheshed's name appears in the margins, written as a warning. The manuscript ends abruptly. She does not permit herself to be written. Some claim the scholar went mad before dying. Others say he was silenced by religious authorities, but the notes survived, and the connections grew stronger. Sheshe wasn't just a goddess, she was a presence, a mechanism of exchange, and the price of communication was life. Over time, Sheshe's figure began to attract the attention of alternative scholars, independent historians, and even researchers devoted to forbidden religions. In restricted forums, documents circulated, photos of uncatalogued artifacts, accounts of unusual experiences linked to relics that officially do not exist. And one of the most disturbing accounts came from a retired archaeologist who worked for years as a consultant for European museums. In an unpublished interview, he described a hematite amulet found in an unmarked box. It bore the shape of a vertical eye surrounded by 3 circles. When he picked it up, he described a sensation of falling, as if the ground beneath him had vanished for a second. In the following weeks, he had recurring dreams of deserts he didn't recognize, of underground chambers filled with silent women, and a constant sensation that someone was walking beside him even when he was alone. He returned the amulet to the museum, advising, "Never display it, never study it." The object was archived without a catalogue number. No one spoke of it again. These stories repeated. In a private collection in Germany, a papyrus bearing spiral symbols was offered for sale. Before the auction could occur, the buyer backed out, claiming sleepless nights and a strange nosebleed after touching the document. He described a tightness around the neck and a maternal presence that suffocated. These might sound like exaggerations, but when the same patterns recur, eyes, blood, silence, breath, they become impossible to ignore. This raises an even more unsettling question. Why was Sheshe's name erased? Why were her temples destroyed? Why were her images so carefully defaced? The answer might lie in a rarely discussed concept among Egyptologists, the fear of the gods themselves. Yes, the Egyptians feared their gods, not for punishment but for imbalance, for excess, for one force breaching the realm of another. And Sheshe, it seems, did not honor these boundaries. She belonged neither to the world of the living nor the dead. She was the between, and like all liminal things, she was unstable, unpredictable, dangerous. A temple in her name would have been a rupture, a place where the world of the living was pierced, where blood didn't seal but opened, where silence responded. For the priesthood, that was unacceptable, and so the erasure began. Names scraped off, statues shattered, papyri burned, and yet she survived. In the underground, in the margins, in the cracks, In 2022, a team of independent restorers was asked to examine a wooden box found in the basement of Cairo's Museum of History. The box wasn't listed in any inventory, and the team was told to work discreetly. Inside were 3 objects: a dark funerary mask, a folded 6-panel papyrus, and a necklace of unknown red stones. But what stood out was the energy they seemed to emit. Not mystically, physically. A warmth on the face, thicker air. The mask had no eyes, just slits filled with a black resin. The necklace bore microscopic spiral engravings. The papyrus, illegible under normal light. Only under ultraviolet did words appear. They followed no known Egyptian grammar. They seemed to be phonetic sounds, ritual syllables, and among them the vertical I, the broken circle, the triple spiral. The lead restorer suffered a seizure the next morning. Upon waking, she said, she was behind the wall. Days later, she resigned, moved to another city, and never spoke of it again. The objects were locked away in a windowless room. In a letter to a colleague, one museum official wrote, "There are things here that must not be translated." He ended, "She doesn't want to be remembered, but she doesn't accept being forgotten." This is the essence of Sheshet, a force that demands silence, but punishes absence. A goddess who doesn't appear, but imposes, who doesn't speak, but is heard. And perhaps the greatest danger is not finding her, but listening to her. And this is where the story stops being archaeological or symbolic and becomes personal. Because an entity like Sheshet, whether she is an archetype, a forgotten deity, or simply the echo of a primitive belief, operates on a plane that cuts across time, space, and language. She doesn't need temples. She doesn't need crowds. Only attention, a glance, a touched object, a memory revived. And if the records, the objects, the stories, and the silences teach us anything, it's that some presences survive not through worship, but through persistence, through symbolic resistance, through unresolved collective trauma. And maybe the cult of Sheshet was exactly that, a human attempt to speak with something unspeakable, something that exists between the first and last breath. So what do we do with this today? Do we keep digging? Keep restoring objects that were buried with the clear purpose of staying hidden? Keep trying to translate names erased by entire cultures? Or maybe we should listen to the silence. Some bolder scholars suggest that entities like Sheshet are more than historical relics. They are codes, mental, emotional, and spiritual programming meant to remind us of limits, of consequences, of forces that exist beyond linear time. And in that sense, what was erased remains active. If you came across one of these artifacts, a bowl that spins on its own, a statue with a missing face, a name no one dares speak, what would you do? Put it on display, study it endlessly, or leave it where you found it, not out of fear, but respect? Because in the end, maybe the real mistake wasn't worshipping her, but forgetting her. If this journey into the shadow of ancient Egypt touched you, stirred something strange, uncomfortable, or familiar, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, and stay with us. The past is calling, and now we are finally listening.